The NHL season is a little less than a month away, and for today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, Jay and I are going to predict who will get the big NHL awards this upcoming season. That's all coming up right after this.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Hunter Hodes, the host of Locked On Penguins. That is Jay Foster, one of the hosts of Locked On Blue Jackets. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can follow Jay on Twitter at _Jacob Foster. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. It's good to be back, Jay. I know I was gone last week. I was out of the country celebrating my anniversary with my girlfriend, but it's nice to be back for this episode, and it's nice that the season is coming up pretty quickly now. We're about, I would say, close to a month, a little less than a month away from the start of the season.
24 days, I believe. No, 26 days.
So, yeah, less than 4 weeks, almost 3.5 weeks at this point. And what better time to predict who will get the main NHL awards this upcoming season? Let's start with, I think, the biggest one, and that is the Hart Trophy. I always love this award. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. It's always been my favorite one. There's so many people define the award very differently, to say the least. You know, most valuable player to your team. Some people think it should just go to, the best overall player in the league. I think, some people, it's weird. People just define it differently, I think is what I'm trying to say. If you had to take a stab at it, who do you think wins the Hart this year? I'll start with you.
So, yeah, the thing about the Hart for me is I don't necessarily think it should go to the best overall player. This year obviously went to McDavid because he had 150 points or something. I believe the year before that it went to Austin Matthews for a 60-goal season. I wouldn't have given it to either of those players, frankly. I don't know who I would have given it to this year, but the year before that I was team Igor Shesterkin because I think he is way more valuable to the team than Austin Matthews was for the Leafs, and that might get some hateful comments, but it's fine. My pick this year is I'm kind of between two guys at the minute. The first one is Jack Hughes. I think if he has another season where he continues to take steps forward, he was phenomenal last season. But I think the guy I'm going to go with is Matthew Tkachuk, who was but far and away the most important player to his team, I think. You can argue that McDavid was the most important player, but I always feel like having Leon Draisaitl as your second guy is, they were 1-3 or 1-2 in points overall this season. So, this is not me saying that McDavid isn't the best player, because I think he is, but I don't necessarily think he's the most valuable. I think Matthew Tkachuk, if he again continues to keep growing like he did this last 2 seasons, if he has another, 100+ point season, I think he's definitely a big candidate for me for the Hart Trophy.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, Tkachuk was on another level during the playoffs for the Florida Panthers, and it stunk that he couldn't finish the series off, at that time. I'm going to have a little bit of a different Hart pick. Yes, Connor McDavid should be the favorite, and I will say, I understand what you're saying when it comes to McDavid should not have won the Hart, but I think it changes a little bit when you have 150+ points in a season. I think at that point, this is just my opinion. I think people overthought it when it came to McDavid this past year. I mean, I know I think he almost won unanimously. There was the one voter.
There was one dude that didn't give him, so he was right. He almost won unanimously 2 years in a row, and then there was one dude who I think gave it to Pasternak instead, which again would have been a fine choice. But
the funny thing is, I know who it is. He's actually a very nice guy. He's based in Pittsburgh. I know who did not vote for McDavid at number one, and he's had a different criteria for the Hart for a long time, so it wasn't just like a throwaway vote. He just has a completely different criteria. This year, it's kind of between two guys. Obviously, McDavid is right up there, but I'm going to go off the road a little bit. I'm going to go Jason Robertson, actually. He was fantastic for the Stars this past season. I think he's only going to get better. I think he has a 100 to 110 point season in him this year. I think he's going to show people that he's not just one of the most underrated players in the league, but he is one of the 5 to 10 best players in hockey. You know, the way that he has rose to stardom so quickly for his NHL career is awesome. And sure, I may get a little bit of flack for this in the comments. I'm ready for it. But Robertson, to me, I'm really high on him in this year. And I'm also really high on the Stars as well. I think he was, again, phenomenal this past season for the Stars. Was great for them in the playoffs. And I think he's going to take that next step for this season.
Yes, we had 109 points this season. Second on the team had 78 points. So that's what, 31 points difference, I believe is a little bit higher than the difference between McDavid and Draisaitl. So McDavid had 153. Leon Draisaitl had 128. So if my maths is correct, he had 25 points more than the next nearest person. And then for the sake of completion, I am just going to go and look at Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk had 109. Alexander Barkov had 78. So exactly the same as Jason Robertson. So like I like both of those picks. I think if Robertson continues to grow and become one of the best young goal scorers in this league, become the best player on the Dallas Stars, or the best skater, certainly, I think maybe not a win unless he really pops off, but definitely I think you could argue for him being in the conversation.
Agreed. I 100% agree with that. I mean, I think he'll at least be a finalist, but I'm going to take him to win it. As you said, amazing season last year. And, you know, with those 109 points, he can definitely break that total this year. I think there's definitely a chance he can hit 120, 125, especially if scoring continues to go up. We'll finish this segment off with who will win the Rocket Richard this year. It's funny, for the longest time, this used to be Alex Ovechkin's award. And, you know, we've seen Austin Matthews win it. We've seen David Pastrnak, I believe, win it as well, Jay. I want to go Ovi so bad because he's just the best goal scorer of all time, in my opinion. He's going to break Wayne Gretzky's record by the time his career comes to an end. But I'm probably going to go Pastrnak this year. He was insane for the Bruins last year. And yeah, he had Bergeron with him. He had Marchand with him. And despite not having Bergeron this year or David Krejci to play with at times, he is still one of, if not the best pure goal scorer in the league right now, even when Alex Ovechkin is a bit older. I'm going to stick with him and go with him. Though if I had to pick a runner-up, it's funny, I will go Ovechkin, and then right behind him, I would go Matthews. Those will be like my top 3 order for who will score the most goals in the NHL this year. I could easily see the other 2 winning it, but I'm going to go Pastrnak for the Rocket Richard.
Yeah, I was also going to pick Pastrnak. He had 61 goals this year, only 3 fewer than McDavid. McDavid just had a monster season. I keep thinking about it, and I'm like,
I almost forgot.
Christ, unreal. So yeah, I would go Pastrnak as well. I think maybe just for fun, I might throw Leon Draisaitl in there. He had 53 goals, or 52 goals, excuse me, this season. And so, you know, if he continues to play like Leon Draisaitl would be the best player on like 28 NHL teams. And it seems unfair that he's on one with the best player in the world, but I'll mix things up. Pastrnak would have been my choice, but if you're picking Pastrnak, I'll say Draisaitl.
That's a good one too. I could definitely see that, especially with the minutes he gets. And yeah, I do remember with Pastrnak, he shared the Rocket Richard the one time he won it, and this time he's going to try to win it individually. It'll be his second Rocket Richard if he wins it, but I'd be curious to see if he can do it. But that's my pick. I like the Draisaitl one too. Matthews is going to be up there.
Matthews is going to be in the mix, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the only reason he wasn't in the mix this year is because he missed some time.
Yes.
I think he had, and he still had 40 goals. Like we talked about this in the contract episode. He had 40 goal season, and that was a down season for him. I'm just trying to find when David Pastrnak won his.
He won it a few years ago. He shared it with Alex Ovechkin, of course.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Ovi's just a cyborg. Would you be surprised if he won it? Because I wouldn't.
I would not. I'm not going to bet money on him, but it's tough to bet against him. Right. You know? Because I could easily see Alex Ovechkin just deciding that he's going to have another 50-goal season at the age of, what is he, 36 now? 37?
Yeah.
Too old to be having 50-goal seasons, but it wouldn't surprise me. The only thing that I think would count against Pastrnak is, like you said, he's going to be going from having Patrice Bergeron as his center to question mark, maybe Charlie Coyle. He'll still have Marchand on the other side, so they probably won't dip that much. But that's the only kind of thing I have against Pastrnak, but I still think it's a really, really solid pick.
Yeah, I agree there. But that wraps up this first segment for the award predictions for this season. Coming up in the second segment, Jay and I are going to discuss who will win the Norris and who will win the Vezina trophy. Before we get to that, though, we have to discuss FanDuel football season has officially kicked off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use these bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL and Locked On. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. That is Jay Foster to my right. So let's get into the Norris now. Jay, this is always a fun award to predict as well. The finalists last year, all three very good defensemen. Cale Makar, Erik Karlsson, and Adam Fox were the three main finalists for the Norris. Karlsson took it home just because he had a 100-point season. He
had a stupid season, yeah.
Just a stupid good season on a really bad team. But this year, my prediction, you could have voted for any of those three this past year, and I wouldn't have batted an eye. I will go Cale Makar this year. I think the only reason he did not win it was because of that 100-point season for Karlsson, but I'll also point out the fact that he was banged up quite a bit this past year. So the fact that he was a finalist goes to show how great he was when he was in the lineup. And if he stays healthy this year, I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. He already is a force to be reckoned with in the NHL, but I think he's going to take it up a notch if he stays healthy, just because he's in his peak years of his career. And I think he's in for a tremendous season. I have him as my pick.
Yeah, it's another guy that you don't want to bet against. Like I just looked at his numbers. He played 60 games last season and had 66 points. He's been at least a point per game or better the last 3 seasons as a defenseman. Wild. Just truly bonkers. He had 86 points in 77 games last season. Or the season before last, excuse me. I'm going to go for none of those 3. I'm going to go outside the box again. How do I feel about Quinn Hughes? Norris winner. I think Quinn Hughes is criminally underrated as a defenseman. Just got given the C in Vancouver for well-deserved, I think. It was second in defensive scoring this season. And again, he was doing that on a pretty bad team. If you get Quinn Hughes like a real defensive partner, like watch out. So I think that's my pick. Honorable mention to Miro Heiskanen, who I think is another one of the most underrated defensemen in the league.
Heiskanen's awesome. I mean, he's tremendous with the Stars. I like that Quinn Hughes pick. Even though I don't think the Canucks are going to be that good this year, they could be maybe a sneaky potential playoff team, but I don't really see it.
They feel like a team that's going to ruin other teams' playoff chances. Like, there was that stretch of time where the Blue Jackets did not make the playoffs, but spent the last month and a half of the season making sure no one else won the playoffs, making sure no one else made the playoffs. Like, that's what I could see from Vancouver. But I mean, look, Erik Karlsson won the Norris with 101 points on the Sharks, who were just, I watched a bunch of Sharks games last season. They were miserable to watch. So, you did good players on bad teams don't necessarily get ignored. So I think, again, outside of the box, but I think Quinn Hughes is who I'm going to go with, just because I love him and I think he's going to be really good this season.
Newest captain of Vancouver Canucks, Quinn Hughes, as well. And congratulations to him for that honor. Finishing up this segment, let's get into the Vezina, a award that there's never any controversy when it comes to the Vezina, right? But
no, never.
No. I'm going to go this year. I'll take Ilya Sorokin. It pains me to say it, but he was the main reason why the Islanders got into the playoffs this past year. Without him playing at the level that he was at, that is a bottom 10 team in the league. He is a top 3 to 5 goalie in the league. I think he's a top 3 goalie, in my opinion. I don't think there are 3 goalies better than him in this league. And I think he's going to outplay Igor Shesterkin this year. I think he's going to outplay Andrei Vasilevsky, UC Saros, Connor Hellebuyck, all these other elite goalies, and he is going to take it home. He's in the prime of his career. He's a fantastic netminder. Someone who, it's funny, I hate when the Penguins go up against him. I can't say the same about Shesterkin because the Penguins can actually beat Shesterkin for goals. They cannot do that on Sorokin. So as much as it pains me to pick Sorokin, the guy is just an unbelievable talent. The Islanders, really hit the jackpot with him. And I think he takes it home this year.
Yeah, I have no disagreements there. I was like, do I go outside the box again? Because I really like Jake Ottinger's chances. Sorokin, for my money, Sorokin should have had the Vezina this season. I know that Linus Ullmark led in basically all categories, but I would go ahead and guess that Linus Ullmark probably had a much easier season than Ilya Sorokin, because of how good the Bruins were. Like you said, the Islanders without Sorokin are a completely different team. I think UC Saros is kind of in that same boat as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him up there in the finalist. But I think, I'm just gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go Ilya Sorokin. I think he's phenomenal. He's gonna be a really, really good goalie for a long time to come, and I think that contract is gonna age very well.
Yes. That's not one of those contracts where you can make fun of Lou Lamoriello for.
It's not giving Sergei Bobrovsky $10 million at the age of 31 or however old he was. It's a good contract. I like the contract, and that helps, I think, with how people perceive Sorokin.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, you can also make the argument of, top teams are completely different without their starting goalie, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, but it is very true with the Islanders. Yes, Semyon Varlamov is a decent backup, but he is not Ilya Sorokin, and he's not. The scene
he's old enough now that he's one of those guys that is a very good backup. If they have to rely on him for more than about 30, 35 games this season, that feels like it's bad news, just because that you don't want your back. He's probably almost 40 by now, Varlamov. That's too old to be playing a bunch of NHL games. I know Craig Anderson just did it, but Craig Anderson was a different beast. Sorokin would be a good pick for the Hart as well, potentially.
Yes.
Goalies never win the Hart, but I think it would be really fun if Ilya Sorokin just blew everyone out of the water this season.
He had some hard consideration this past year just because he was the main reason why the Islanders got in. They didn't really play that well down the stretch, but he was the main reason why they got in. I remember he burst onto the scene like it was nothing just a few years ago. I mean, the Islanders, it's funny, they started Sorokin in that series. They go back to Varlamov, and then they put Sorokin back in, and it's just like, oh, okay, yeah. And then he just takes them, through the Penguins, through the second round. They get to the third round. He is a special goalie, and I really do think he's in line for a really special season. But I think that'll do it for this segment. Coming up to end the show, Jay are going to finish off with the Calder and the Jack Adams for this year. So stick around for that. Coming up right after this. All right, we're back here on this Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Hunter Hodes. That is Jay Foster. So the Calder, I'm not going to overcomplicate things here.
Oh, I am. I am fully ready to overcomplicate the Calder.
You are going to get the comments, I'm sure, on YouTube. I'm going to go with Connor Bedard, though. He's the best rookie in this class. Are the Blackhawks going to be really bad this year? Yes. Are they going to be as bad as they were last year? No. With that, he has better talent around him. They traded for Taylor Hall this past season. I think they're going to staple Bedard with him.
They'd be stupid not to.
It's going to be a lot of fun seeing Bedard go against Crosby on opening night. I'm going to go with Bedard. Now, is he going to get 80 to 90 points his first year? Probably not. I'll go in that 60 to 70 point range for Bedard, maybe a little lower, but I don't think he's going to be at a point per game just yet, but I still think he's going to have a really good year to win the Calder. you can make other arguments, and I know you're about to, but I'm going to go with
but not for the player that you think. I think.
I thought I had your pick in mind, but now I'm not so sure. But I'm going to go with Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for betting on Connor Bedard. The kid's going to be a freak out there. You mentioned Taylor Hall. He's probably going to be playing with Lucas Reichel, who before Bedard was probably the best Blackhawks prospect that they had. He's ready to make the big time. Seth Jones, who I know gets a lot of hate, but I think he's probably overpaid, but also overhated. He was good this season, way better than he was last season. And again, I think if you put those two guys together on the power play, like that feels like it's going to click all season long. Adam Fantilli is probably a dark horse in this conversation, as insane as it thinks. I actually said on Locked On Blue Jackets that my bet is that he gets 30 goals, 30 assists for 60 points and challenges for the Calder. I think Fantilli has a better supporting cast than Bedard, but I also don't know that he wins the Calder. My choice is Logan Cooley, who's coming from the University of Minnesota and is going to make it very, very difficult. I think, again, if you staple him to a guy like Clayton Keller, who is maybe one of the more underrated young guys in this league, you're going to get some results there. So I think the Coyotes were kind of robbed last season by Matthias Michelli, not even getting finalist for the Calder. But I think if things click for them and the Coyotes end up pushing for the playoffs, I could see Bedard leading in points, but Cooley winning the Calder and I know it's a regular season award. No one come at me in the comments to tell me that, but you can't tell me that going into making the playoffs does not come into account for this kind of thing. I think if Cooley makes the playoffs with the Coyotes, which is possible, I think, not likely, but possible, I think Cooley takes the Calder.
I like that pick. And it's funny, I haven't really seen that many people on the Coyotes bandwagon for this year, but maybe I need to, I guess, read up more on them, just because you seem to think that there's at least a possibility that they could sneak into a playoff spot with.
I think it's just because the West is so weird.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just like the West is so weird. And
right.
I might be completely misremembering how the conferences work. Let me just double check before I continue talking out of my ass. Yeah, they're in the Central Division, which, as we all know, is two good teams and a bunch of guys. So
yeah,
if the Coyotes, it's such a crapshoot, the Central. Again, do I think it's likely? No, but I could see the Coyotes making the playoffs in the similar way that the Islanders kind of limped into the playoffs this season. You knew they probably weren't going to do anything with it, but they made it there.
Agreed. So, I mean, that would be interesting, especially with all the rumors surrounding Arizona, Jay, with relocation and all this other stuff. But having a full season of Clayton Keller will pay massive dividends. Let's just be real here. And then if Logan Cooley pans out the way you think he will, and a lot of other people think he will, you never know. Maybe they do push for a playoff spot this year.
Finally, it's not a terrible roster.
Looking
at the signings that they've made, it's not like wall-to-wall stars, but they've got Dylan Genther on the team. I like Nick Schmaltz a lot as an option at center.
He's great.
Matthias Michelli. If you put Logan Cooley between Dylan Guenther and Matthias Michelli, or Dylan Guenther and Clayton Keller, or any combination of those three players, that's going to be a problem for a lot of NHL teams, I think.
And I'll say their goalie, Vemelka, he's probably one of the more underrated goalies, in the league. He is phenomenal. And he had a pretty good year last year in terms of goals saved above expected. His save percentage wasn't there fully, but he still had a pretty good year for a bad Coyotes team. Finally, the Jack Adams Trophy goes to the best coach in the NHL. Jay, I'm going to let you lead off with this one. Who do you think takes home the Jack Adams this year? The award that I like to call the coach that gets the best goaltending in the league.
I mean, we all know who it should be, because I think, and we've talked about this on the show before, I think Mike Sullivan is consistently the best coach in this league. but it always goes to, it goes to a team that makes history, like the Bruins did last year, or it goes to a team that they thought would be bad, but would actually be good. So like, probably this is me being a homer a little bit, even though I disagree with the take. I wouldn't be surprised to get Mike Babcock, to see Mike Babcock getting Jack Adams' vote if the Blue Jackets make the playoffs. I don't necessarily think that those two things, this is not me saying, hey, Mike Babcock should win the Jack Adams, but I could see other people thinking that. Rod Brind'Amour is always good for Jack Adams consideration. I'm just looking at the list of coaches now. I wonder if Andrew Brunette drags the Predators into the playoffs and gets Jack Adams consideration.
He's a dark horse for me. I think he can at least be a finalist for this year. Remember last year, UC Soros was dragging that Predators team, or trying to, for a playoff spot. And John Hines really wasn't doing anything as the Predators head coach. Now you have Brunette, who coaches a much different style, much more offense. When he was the coach of the Panthers, they led the league in goals per game. I still to this day am mad that the Panthers let him go, but hey, it worked out for this past season because Paul Maurice took them in the Stanley Cup Finals. So Joke's on me for that one right there. But Andrew Brunette, I think he can definitely take that Predators team, or at least try to. For the playoffs.
Oh, I have one more option. Sorry. Apologies if I'm just stealing all of your names. Dave Haxtell, who I think everyone laughed at the Kraken when they hired him. Yeah, I was like, this is going to be such a tire fire. And he's done a really, really good job. The Kraken are one of those teams that have become better than the sum of their parts. And I think that's partially coaching. I think that's partially everyone knows what they're doing, partially goaltending. But yeah, Dave Haxtell, I think, is my sleeper pick for the Jack Adams.
He had a great season as the Kraken head coach. He's definitely learned some things from what went wrong with the Flyers. And he took that and applied them to the Kraken, and he's become one of the better coaches in the league. I will eat all the crow on that one. I'll also throw out a name. He's one of the best coaches in the league, John Cooper. I think the Lightning have something to prove this year. A lot of people writing them off, or starting to write them off, Jay, but they still got Andrei Vasilevsky. They still have that core group of players who are awesome. I would not be surprised if Cooper wins it. It may seem weird because, the Lightning have had so much success in the last decade, but they were first-round exit this past year to the Maple Leafs. It's gone a little downhill since they won those back-to-back cups.
Yeah.
I would not
Which feels insane. They won back-to-back cups, and then they were in the final against Colorado, right? And now, here's a question for you just before we wrap up. If they lose to a team that's not the Leafs, do you think the perception of the Lightning changes based on other teams? Do other fan bases, if they'd lost to Boston, for example, do you think that they have that same perception of, because I'm fully willing to admit, and I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago on Locked On NHL, I was like, man, Nikita Kucherov is starting to get old and fading. And then I looked at how many points he had this season, and he was third in the league in points. So I was completely off base on that, but I just assumed that the Lightning were on their way out. So I wonder if they lose to Boston instead of to Toronto, does that perception change?
I think so a little bit, just because Boston was the best team in NHL regular season history this past year. And I think losing to a team that had not won a series in about 20 years, that will, let's be honest here, it gets the storylines going, to be fair. So I think it definitely does change a bit if they had lost to a team like Boston or something like that. But I do think they still have something to prove this year. That core group of players is phenomenal. They still have really strong depth. And when you have Andrei Vasilevsky in net, even though he's been a bit gassed lately, that's going to be a team to be reckoned with. And I think John Cooper can definitely win the Jack Adams. Mike Sullivan, as you said, if he can lead the Penguins back to the playoffs, Jay, maybe get them to finish top 2 to 3 in the Metro, he should get serious consideration for the Jack Adams. He should have won it, I think, before. He's one of the best head coaches in the league. I could definitely see that. If I had to pick a winner, though, just a pure winner, you know what? I am going to go Andrew Brunette. I think he's going to do enough for the Predators. He's going to get them to be very much in the race. And if he gets them to the playoffs, I think he wins that award. Whether it's close, whether it's a blowout, he will win it. He deserves this shot at getting that team back in the playoffs. He deserves a shot to be an NHL head coach. And considering what he did with the Panthers, I know it didn't end well in the second round last year against the Lightning. But I'm going to go with him. He's going to, he was a dark horse for me going into it, but I think I've talked myself into it enough that he's going to win the Jack Adams this year.
It's, it's what they always say, isn't it? Show me a good coach and I'll show you a good goalie.
Right. I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised. I've closed my list of NHL head coaches now. I've completely forgotten what the Islanders head coach is called.
Lane Lambert.
Thank you, Lane Lambert. I also wouldn't be surprised to see him get some votes based on Ilya Sorokin carrying the entire team for 82 games, You
should see what Islanders fans say about him on social media and stuff. They do not like him, and they know that.
Oh, no, I bet it's brutal. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him get some votes as well, just because that's how they work. Like, Tortorella won the Jack Adams, I believe, on the back of Sergei Bobrovsky's Vezina.
Right. You're right. So, again, you're right. I'll always say it. Jack Adams winner, that's the team that usually gets the best goaltending, or one of the teams that gets the best goaltending.
Mm-hmm. Or the team that was supposed to be bad and wasn't.
Yes. So great point there. I don't think we have any other awards to get to for this episode, Jay, but that would do it for this edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. The Friday edition will be back with Rachel and Gil, so stick around for that coming up on Friday. We will be back next week as the season continues to inch closer and closer. We're really excited about it, but thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, and Rachel and Gil will talk with you all on Friday.